What is up, family and friends? Welcome to yet another family Bible study. And a couple of quick things up front. Again, my name is TJ. This is coming at you through our Facebook Live, but this will also be on YouTube. As usual, we will put the broadcast up on there. And for you guys who aren't familiar, we have a YouTube channel, which is the FHL Initiative. It is a great place, particularly in the playlist section, to find a bunch of great ministry resources from all kind of different ministries, life topics, things like that. It gives gives people a place to go and just kind of like a shopping mall of ministry topics, if you will, except it's free, right? It doesn't cost you anything. And so I can't encourage you enough. If you're just dealing with something or have been dealing with something a long time, family issue, relationship issue, a mental, like a depression or just, self-hate or anything like that, there are lots of great resources, ministry tools that are on there, but particularly, not just messages, but testimonials and things like that. So I always like to take time to mention that for sure. Also, I'd recommend looking up our Facebook page for the FHL Initiative, because that's where I'll put updates on new things, like schedule changes. We typically do this broadcast Mondays at 7 p.m. Central, but if that changes, that would be the place that I would make note of that, so that you can plug in and know what's going on as far as that's concerned. And so with that said, we have been going through James, the book of James, and we are in chapter 5 right now. Last week we went through verses 1 through 6 in James chapter 5, and we were talking about how the Lord, how James really, the book of James, I should say, gives us a good idea of how we should treat, it talks about the wealthy people exploiting the poor people. But we also talked about how we should view different classes and how the enemy, Satan, our enemy, the enemy of the church, loves division, and how he's always trying to create division in our lives and so on. But we also talked about, and this will kind of parlay into what we're going to go on talk about today, we talked about how God stood up for those people who were righteous but oppressed. In other words, they were being taken advantage of, and they didn't have the power, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the ability to, leverage or force what was right out of the hands of those who were over them. And how important that lesson is, because again, in today's world, the thought process for so many, and certainly the thought process of the overall world, is to get your way through force, through angry language, through litigation, using the legal system, which is all, you can do that properly and legally and things like that. And that's there for a reason. It's not, bad. But with that said, going to the Lord first and taking our grievances, our problems, our challenges in life before Him and saying, I want to put this in your hands, and I want to know what you want me to do about it, if anything. And that allows for the Lord to get involved in our lives and get involved in our situations, and He can do what's really truly right and really bring out the correct outcome that we want, and even better than we want. Because a lot of times, you know how this is, our emotions get involved with things, and what we want is not necessarily for the best. We just want what makes us feel good, what we think is right. We want to be compensated for what happened to us, and so on and so forth. And God is, that's small potatoes. God had such a bigger plan that He can work things out way better than we ever thought. But he's not able to do that if we're just going to force things and try to make people, through whatever way of force we have available to us, make people get in line with our desires, our wishes. But I'll tell you again, and this is a good rule of thumb, the way of the world is force. The way of Satan is force, and he's the primary influence on the world. Again, the word calls him the God of this world. In other words, he's the primary influence behind it. And Jesus called him the prince of this world because he's the one that's really behind running governments and large establishments, a little family establishment, all these different things where you see so much evil prevalent. Why is that? That's because Satan's the main influence behind it. And he originally tried to take a place in heaven that did not belong to him. He wanted to be like God, and he tried to force his way into that position. He got 1/3 of the angels of heaven to join with him in a rebellion against God. So where you see rebellion, where you see force, where you see someone trying to take something, that they feel like this is the way it should be, you're very often you're seeing, Satan at work there. Okay. Now, again, does that mean that God doesn't raise up righteous people to do righteous things and put people in, legal positions and governmental positions and, positions in families and so on? And he uses those people to cause things to be transitioned forcefully. He certainly does. Our military and things like that, he certainly does use those people. But I have found for myself, it's a good rule of thumb to take it before him and not have the mindset of how can I force things in my own power to get done. So that's a long way of saying that in any situation we need to learn, and it's not easy on our flesh. It's not easy at all. But we need to learn to take it to God and allow him to work through our situation. Now, again, I say all that to parlay into what we're talking about today, which is James 5:7. We're going to start 5:7. And this is so helpful. If we will soak this into our beings, what we're about to talk about next, our lives will turn out so much more productive for the Lord than they would have otherwise. And so much less, we will avoid unnecessary turmoil for ourselves. I'll put it that way. And things will turn out much better than we could have planned. So James 5:7, this is the NASB version, says, therefore, so remember, he was just talking about letting God handle things and not, these people are being oppressed by, these poor people are being oppressed by rich people. And he's saying, I'm going to handle this. So the next verse goes on to say, therefore, because he's going to handle it, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil. Be patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. So let me kind of explain that a little bit. First of all, there's that word, patience. We do not naturally in our flesh, most of us do not like the word patience. We like quick. The way of the world is forceful, the way of the world, and again, Satan is quick. It's grab what you can. People don't like to sit still. People don't like to wait for anything. I'm speaking naturally speaking. As we mature spiritually, you're going to find that you're going to grow in patience. Why is that? Because one of the fruits of the Spirit, as according to Galatians, I think that's in Galatians 5, wherever the fruit of the Spirit is found. But one of the fruit of the Spirit is patience. In other words, as we dwell with the Lord, as we spend time with him, as we get around him more and more, just like anybody else we associate with, we start becoming more like him. So again, that's a huge tip, because so many of us, we have a desire like, well, I want to be like Christ. I want to be Christ-like. I want to be more like God. I want to be less like the me that I've been familiar with it, which is maybe a person that you're not happy about. You don't like certain things about your personality, your characteristics, things like that. That's all the stuff of the flesh. We do want to leave those things behind. And a lot of times, at least I didn't always understand how to do that. I try to do it through, maybe if I read my Bible more, I listen to more messages, more sermons, maybe if I, just do like religious type of things more, go to church more or whatever, maybe do more good deeds. It'll change who I am at the core. And that, yes or no, it depends. If your attitude is just to do that and check the box, and by following rules you're going to get better, no, that's probably not going to happen, because you're trying to follow the law. That's what they did in the Old Testament. They had all these rules, and they were supposed to follow these rules, and it was going to help them be more righteous. In the New Testament, God has, through Jesus dying on the cross, Jesus made a way for the Holy Spirit to live in us as Christians, as believers. That's what happens. We give our life to Christ. We say, Lord, I want you to be Lord over me. I want to be under you. I want you over me. I want you to rule my life. I want you to be my Savior, so on. And that allows him to put the Holy Spirit inside of us. Now we have someone else, God himself, living inside of us. And we can restrict him in ourselves because we still have our free will and say, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to spend my time here and maybe not over here where I should or whatever. Or we can allow him to express himself more through us. And the point is, as we associate with God, as we just take time away from people, yes, sometimes reading our Bible, sometimes in worship, sometimes by going to a church service with the body of believers, whatever. The point is always, I want to get around God. I want to get around his things. I want to give him access into my life. You'll get his Spirit, which dwells in us, can become more, amplified in us, around us, and we're literally associating with God. That's the best way I can put it for you right now. And as we associate with him and we read his word and we're putting these things in us and in our minds and so on, literally his traits start to grow in us like fruit in a garden. It grows. It takes time, but we'll find ourselves, instead of trying to be more patient, we will be more patient. Instead of trying to be more full of joy and less full of depression and anxiety, we will be more full of joy. Instead of trying to not be afraid of things, I'm going to try hard not to be afraid or be fearful or not, be anxious about my children or anxious about my situations or my finances or my job or, COVID and all this different stuff. I'm very concerned about, getting COVID or, what would happen if my relative gets it or whatever. Instead of trying to push those thoughts away, the peace of God, because peace is a fruit of the Spirit, will start growing in us, and it just like displaces fear. Just like if you have a glass full of, let's say, soda of Coke, but you put that under a faucet and you start, running water into the faucet, from the faucet into the glass, give it enough time, it starts displacing the Coke. The Coke starts, overspilling the glass or overflowing the glass. And if you leave it running long enough, eventually it's all water. That's the way we displace these things in our life. We displace fear, and that's such a different concept than trying really hard to get these things out of our life. Okay, so patience, this is what this verse says: be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. And if you don't understand the concept of displacement, you don't understand the concept, and I didn't understand any of these things. You're not born knowing these things. Someone has to teach you, right? And so as I started learning these things, through ministers, through the Lord just teaching me things directly as I'm reading the Bible and putting these things in, like I always say, open your Bible and just say, let's talk, God. It's not just about reading, it's about this communication. As I started realizing that was the case, so when I see things like be patient, brethren, it doesn't mean I just have to strong arm myself into patience. He'll work with my willpower. He works with, I'll go, I'm going to take my willpower and I'm going to sit down in front of the Bible instead of sitting down in front of a movie or in front of a TV or in front of social media. I'm going to use my willpower to put myself in front of the Word so the Lord can communicate to me, and so his traits can grow up in me. And that makes it available for you, for me, and anyone else, that even if we're not patient people, admittingly, we have very little patience in our life, we can grow into patient people. We can grow into people who are willing to wait until the Lord accomplishes what he's wanting to accomplish in us. And that's why verse 7 here says, the farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, and being patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. What does that mean? Well, if you're a real farmer, so let's say you have a lot of anxiety in your life. You're just very anxious about things. You're constantly thinking about some particular topic. And I've been here, man. I'll tell you what, there were times in my life where money was super scarce. I didn't know how I was going to pay my bills. I didn't know how my job wasn't going well, anything like that. And it was just always on my mind, bombarding my mind. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it just became, depressing. And I was wanting to sleep all the time to just kind of escape that mental, bondage, so to speak. And it was pretty rough, to be honest with you. And so I've been there, So let's say you're a person that maybe you have a lot of anxiety or fear or anger or even unforgiveness. There's people that have wronged you or you felt have wronged you or have legitimately wronged you, and you want this stuff out of you. Well, if you look at the remedy of that, if I gave you a seed and I said, if you plant this seed and you grow it, it will grow into and delete. It'll crush everything that you don't want in your life. If you want more, whatever it is, your impatience, it'll crush that. Your fear, it'll crush that. So you go, you're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's just the way it works. So just plant the seed, okay? So a little analogy. So let's say you plant the seed. Well, you already expect a process. You expect you're gonna have to water it and take care of the seed. But as time goes by, you'll see little sprouts above the ground, and it'll grow, and eventually it produces a fruit. It produces something. And let's just say that I'm like, if you get that fruit and you eat it, it will just crush everything else in your life. So you're waiting, everything that's wrong in your life that you're trying to get rid of, right? So you're waiting for this fruit to grow so you can take it, you can eat this fruit. Well, that's essentially what the Lord is conveying to us here. Farmers realize there's a process. There's going to be likely a process to getting rid of what you don't want in your life. Maybe it's an addiction of some sort, and it's been there for years and years and years. And you're like, well, this is just the way it is. I guess I'm never going to get rid of this. No, that's not true, but it may be a process. Sometimes the Lord does deliver people from things, just boom, just it's gone. But that's the exception, not the norm. Most times we have to go through a process because it builds our faith up, and we become very strong in those areas because they used to rule us. And since we've overcome those areas, in the areas you overcome, you're very strong and you can help other people. So it's to our benefit when we go through a process of overcoming. It's a strengthening process. So the point is, in this verse here, it says the farmer waits patiently for the early and late rains, and that's an agricultural term because, and I'm not super up on this at all. I mean, I've done a little bit of reading on it, but I realized that there were fall rains that helped prepare the soil for planting and things like that. And then there were the early spring rains that brought, when spring comes around, it's time for those things planted to start coming up. And so in that agricultural society, it was important that they had the fall rain, and it was important that they had the spring rain for them to get the harvest that they were going to live off, their livelihood. And so the Lord is saying, you guys wait patiently, naturally speaking, for the late and the early and the late rain, and to get the harvest. And in your lives, you have to be willing to go through seasons. Now, I've been around a lot of ministry through the years, and ministers and so on, and a lot of them, it was always kind of like, it's always harvest season. And no matter what season of life, it's harvest season. Your breakthrough is coming soon, right away, right? So on and so forth. You're right around the corner from exactly what you want, and so on. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not, because sometimes there's going to be a process. And the problem with that mindset, and I used to teach that mindset, it was something I also promoted, until the Lord finally showed me that even Jesus, the Lord promised him, he said, you wait here. He came to earth, he died, he rose again, he went up to heaven, and the Lord said, wait here until I make your enemies a footstool for you. Sit here on the right hand of me on the throne of majesty until I make your enemies at your footstool. And you can look up that verse where that's referenced. It's in several places in the Bible. But the point is, Jesus is waiting patiently for that to happen. So it doesn't matter if it's me, it doesn't matter if it's you, it doesn't matter if it's Jesus. We're all waiting for promises, but we should all be waiting for promises by faith, in faith, believing God. You're going to do what you said you're going to do, and we're going to wait for those things to come around, because there is a specific time that God, the Father, is going to wrap up this earth age and say, okay, it's done. Everyone that has had the opportunity to receive Christ, and now, it's too late. He's going to cut it off at a certain point. And Jesus is waiting patiently for that. Believers are waiting patiently for that. But the point is, the family of faith is a family of waiting. Now, this is what I didn't understand about that. Waiting is an action word. Waiting is an action word. There is, if you look at Jesus in the Bible, even after he ascended to the Father and these words were spoken to him, he still came back from heaven and spent 40 days on earth teaching about the kingdom of God, even after he resurrected from the grave. It wasn't like he just sat down on the throne and did nothing. You see him standing when the first martyr took place, which was Stephen, in the early church. This is many years, number of years after Jesus had gone up to heaven. You see Jesus again in Revelation talking to John, who wrote the book of Revelation, and he's showing him all these things. Jesus isn't sitting down doing nothing until the Father puts his enemies under his feet, but he is waiting patiently. So what does that mean for you and me? It's the same. A farmer doesn't do nothing after he's planted the whatever he's planted in the field. There's still things to do in different seasons. You have to get the soil ready. You got to plant the fertilize and plant, and you got to do all these things. And some of the most strenuous time is harvest season, when you have to go out there and bring all this stuff in that is out there, but it's a joyous harvest season. So for whatever you're waiting on, you may be in the winter season of it. You may be in the spring season and you're right around the corner from being able to harvest. You might be in the summer season, you could be in the fall season, and fall, of course, is a harvest time. And your harvest could be like I said, a breakthrough in any particular area of your life. But so often the word breakthrough makes it seem like it's an overnight suddenly out of nowhere. But often that's not the case. Breakthrough is more like saying your harvest is here. Now go reap your harvest. But you've been planting the word into your mind. You've been spending time with the Lord. You've been waiting patiently for things to change. You've been getting prepared, because again, that's part of the reason for the time between the promise. God said, yes, I will set you free of whatever's holding you back. Yes, I'll take care of your kids. Yes, I'll take care of your finances. Yes, I'll do these different things. That's the promise. But the harvest may be a year from there, 2 years from now, 6 months from now, 10 years from now. In the case of Abraham getting Isaac, God made a promise, and over 25 years later, he reaped the harvest of Isaac. He reaped a child, if you go back and read the story of Abraham. And so, but when you get that promise, there's such joy and there's such victory there, okay? So why am I saying that? Is that to discourage people? Well, I think if we're strongly flesh-oriented people, yes, it's kind of discouraging, because you're like, oh, so you're saying I might have to wait. Yeah, but if you're going to have to wait, wouldn't you rather know up front? That's the way I am. Like, if this is going to be a process, please just let me know it's going to be a process, so that I could prepare myself emotionally for a process. But if I'm just like every day, like, this is the day, it must be the day, I've been waiting, this is the day, this is it. You can rev your emotions way up sky high, and eventually what often it leads to is discouragement, because it only takes so many days of revving your emotions. Try that with your car, just keep revving it. It just wears things down. And so the Bible is huge on this word of patience, because things just take time down here on the planet Earth. It's just the way it is, okay? So verse 8 goes on to say, to that note, you too be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Now again, the coming of the Lord, the early church lived in full view that Jesus was coming back soon. And what that meant is when he does come back, he's going to fix all the wrong things. He's going to, all the stuff that's problematic and so on, that's just bad for you, bad for me, bad for humanity. Christ is coming back, and that stuff is not going to exist anymore. And they lived in full view of that. And so that expectation helped encourage them. Now, of course, logically we go, well, they lived and they died and they didn't see Jesus come back. Correct. But that has nothing to do with the fact that he's still coming back. And that viewpoint that they carried with them kept them in the mindset of, I want to do things in such a way that it pleases the Lord. Because even if he doesn't come back in your lifetime, if he somehow doesn't come back in my lifetime, which I'm thinking he will, but every believer does, right? But I'm thinking he will. But even if he doesn't, how many years is it going to be before you're going to be in front of him anyway? Because you're not going to live forever. And that scale is different for each one of us. And the question I would propose is, are you living in such a way that you feel that it is pleasing to him? That doesn't mean you live perfect. We're all a work in progress while we're on this earth. It's not a matter of perfection. It's a matter of your heart. If you have children, let's just say, or again, if you don't have children, I don't have children, but I'm around kids enough to know this doesn't take a ton of imagination. If you have children, your children probably aren't actually perfect and do absolutely everything right. But you're pleased when you see them progressing, when you see them learning, you see them trying to do what pleases you, like, Mom, I took out the trash, or Dad, I went and did this, or whatever, at whatever level they're at, whatever age, whether they're teenagers, grown children, little small children, you're pleased to see them progressing. That's what the Lord wants from us. He's pleased when he sees us progressing. It doesn't matter that we're not perfect yet. That's not even on the table. That's not, I said that because Paul, the Apostle Paul specifically says, now we know in part, and when we are in heaven, then we'll know fully. Now we prophesy in part, then we'll prophesy. Eventually prophecy will cease because it won't be necessary, but that's all in 1 Corinthians 13. You can read that. So we're never going to know everything down here. We're still going to be growing into an image of Christ, which is perfection. We're progressing. So the question isn't, are you perfect? Have you done everything right? But the question is, are you living up to what you know, what the Lord has shown you? Are you pursuing him? Are you endeavoring to be like him? Is he your number one person, priority, the thing that you love more than anything else? If you had to keep one thing, would it be him, or would it be your relationships, or your job, or your finances, or whatever the case may be? That's where we should be progressing to, is loving him, desiring him more, following him, chasing after him. Those things please God. And as we grow up, Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it's impossible to please God, because in order to please him, you must believe he exists and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. So, are you pursuing him with your heart? That's the question when we go to bed at night, we wake up in the morning, that is most important. And as we grow, like I said, as we grow in faith, we start learning, okay, if I seek him, he'll give me a revelation. He'll give me a promise. He'll say, yes, I'll take care of that situation. And then he'll start walking you through the process of getting to the end result that he's promised you, a good result, in your family, in your finances, in whatever area, in your mind. And so that you can be a testimony for him to other people. He'll start walking you through that. And it so pleases him, even though we have our emotional ups and downs, like as you're going through that process of planting and, fertilizing and waiting and, all this process before the harvest, but you're sticking with him. It's okay, so to speak, if your emotions go up and down and you're not always excited about it. Again, Jesus, before he went to the cross in Gethsemane, in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was very emotional, but he held his emotions at bay, and he went through with what the Father had told him to do. That pleases the Father. And so again, we don't have to be these emotionally sterile people. That's not on the table. It's not of interest to God. He's not trying. We live on planet Earth. We're in a body, and the body feeds all kind of impulses and chemicals. And just the way the body works, men and women, all these different balances and chemicals and things like that. All these things vary, and they can affect our emotions and the way we see things. But if we are in faith, we hold on to what we know from God, and we hold on to it tightly. Just like if you ever have, makes me think of water skiing or being tubing. You get on those tubes and the boat's whipping around. You're trying to hold on to the tube so you don't fly off the tube. That's kind of the same thing. You got all this adversity, and you hold on to what God has promised you, and everything seems to be trying to throw you off. But you say, I don't care. I don't care how I feel. I don't care if the circumstances don't look good. I don't care. I'm going to hang on tight to what he has said to me, or what I read right here in this word. Isaiah 53 talks about really the whole passage, but 4 and 5 talks about how Jesus has taken our sicknesses and our diseases, and how he's healed us from all these things, our pain, and he's paid for essentially the chastisement of our peace. In other words, anxiety and anything that challenges our peace. Like Jesus has already taken all this stuff on him, and he took it on him so that we didn't have to carry it on ourselves. So when you read something like that, you go, well, hold on. If Jesus already paid for these things to be taken care of, why am I going to pay for it as well? Like, why am I going to pay with my worry? Why am I going to pay with depression and anxiety? Why am I going to carry pain and sickness around in my body? If he carried it in his body, why should I carry it in my body? There's no reason that this should be paid for twice. You have a lot of things in your life that's been paid for. How excited would you be about paying for them twice? Or if you bought you some food, let's say you go to a restaurant for your friend and you go and pay the tab, and then your friend also goes and pays the tab for the same food. Is that a blessing to you? Do you think that's great? The restaurant might, but you wouldn't. Why? Because you shouldn't pay for the same thing twice. If Jesus paid for our sicknesses, disease, depressions, anxiety, he's paid for all these different things, then you and I shouldn't pay for it. But here's the thing, if we don't know how to be patient and go through the process of harvesting those things, then we will pay for it. We will live with sickness, disease, depression, anxiety, pick your thing. We'll live with poverty in our life, etc. We'll just live with these things even though we don't have to, So it's worth finding, getting in the Word about whatever it is that you're dealing with, and finding out what does God say about this, and finding other scriptures. I like to use the resource Bible Hub. That's a great resource because Bible Hub, you can download the app, you can go online and look it up. There's a lot of Bible resources or whatever out there that you could certainly use. But I know, like Bible Hub, you can get one verse and it will cross-reference a lot of other verses that are like it. And you can just go around the Word and in the book and find out, what did God say about this? What did God say about this? What did God say about whatever your situation is? And again, with the attitude that's, God, Father, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you about this thing. And once you get something from him, and it's like, well, this is how it's going to be. You're healed because Jesus said you're healed. So take a hold of that. Hold on to it. And then let's go through this process together. Sometimes there's medical things involved. Sometimes it's just pure, putting the Word of God in. Sometimes you need counseling. Sometimes you need a good friend, whatever the case may be. The Lord can use a lot of different resources that some are natural, some are purely supernatural. But in any case, going from bad to good, that is the help of the Lord that gets us there when we rely on it. Because a lot of times people go from bad to worse to completely a disaster, even down to death, because they had no other resource. Nothing was there to help them. Nothing was there to sustain them, except for natural resources exclusively. And the problem with that is when we rely on natural remedies exclusively. I'm going to use just natural counseling. I'm going to use just natural medicines. I'm going to use just what the doctors say. I'm going to use just these things. So you got the natural side and the supernatural side. If all we rely on is here, then when those things can't do anything else, when the doctor says, I'm sorry, we can't do anything else, when the counselor says, I'm sorry, I can't do anything else, when whatever natural, your friends let you down, the thing you rely on let you down, your job is your one resource, it's the only thing you know about creating finances is how to do it in a business or a job scenario, tit for tat. When that lets you down, then you are stuck, you're done, you have nowhere else to go. But when your resource, your first place, is your relationship with God, knowing him, loving him, and because you know him, because you love him, because you are family to him, sons and daughters, then you know everything he has, you have access to. You can go to him and say, what do I need to do here? And then he can give you a natural resource if that's the way it's going to be, but he's feeding you and helping you and hope, giving you hope and pictures of, where you're going to be and so on. And he'll send people to encourage you, and he'll put you in front of ministers and ministries that will encourage you. And it's like he keeps putting little things to help you get through day by day. You don't ever see him a lot of times, but he's helping you on the back end. And so even when the doctors have said, we can't do anything else, that doesn't matter. I'm not counting on you because I've got a God that still heals, and he will still come through for you. I've got, in the church I go to, we have testimonies for days of people where the doctor says you have to die and they're still alive many years later. This is incurable and they have been cured from it. I mean, for days, these type of things, miraculous things that the Lord has done. And sometimes they use surgeries and things like that. But when they went in to do the surgery, it turned out better than they thought. There was less to do than they thought, or whatever. Or in some cases, they didn't need the surgeries, period, etc. And people are like, well, how do I see that kind of stuff in the Bible, but how do I get it into my life? You go through the process of, first of all, step one, desiring to know God, who He is, getting close to Him because of who He is, not because of what He has. Don't be a Christian gold digger. You're chasing Him just because of what He can do for you. You're chasing Him for Him. And then you start getting things from Him in terms of what to do, and you go through this process of recovery. Okay? And I'm telling you, I've been through there with just different things in my personal life, different mindsets that I just could not get out of my mind, etc. And I thought, man, I'm just always going to think through this lens. This is just the way it is. And yet, as I read through the Word, and as I got ministers that I learned from, and people that would speak into my life and things like that, I would get free from mental bondages and free from this and free from that, or finances that were a wreck. And then the Lord would lead me into a situation where over time at jobs and things like that, I would prosper and money would come flooding in, and I could never have organized the situation. But when I look back over time, the consistent thing that I always see is that it took me seeking the Lord, and it took Him giving me something. I saw something in the Word of God that I believe that resonated with my spirit, and I go, that's me, that's mine, I can see that. And then I went through a process of walking through it until it was completed. That's no different than what you see with Jesus. Jesus didn't just pop onto the earth, suddenly He was a superstar minister, and then He went straight up to heaven and everything just worked out without any issues. No, Jesus came to earth as a baby. Herod tried to kill Him. He had to run away. His family had to run Him away from Herod, etc. He grew up for 30 years. He didn't do any ministry, anything at all. He finally goes into ministry, which ended in Him being crucified on a cross, going to hell for several days, and then finally ascending back up to heaven. And now He's in the position He's in now. If He had to go through a process to get His victory, it's only logical that you and I are going to have to go through a process to get our victory. Not everything comes overnight. And for best results, just add patience, I suppose, would be a way of saying that. But again, for best results, spend time with the Lord, seek the Lord, get around Him. And through association, patience, like I said, go read through the fruits of the spirits. I think it's Galatians 5, maybe 18 or something, I don't know. But you can look it up. It's not hard to find the fruit of the Spirit. But patience and kindness and peace and all these different things, faith and all that different self-control, these fruit of the Spirit, they will start growing, yes, in you. And again, some of you guys, this is par for the course. You live in this. This is what you do all the time. You've already seen this fruit start manifesting in your life. And then others of you were like I was at one point in my life. I had no idea of any of these things, and I needed to, I had to learn to start growing in them. And the good news is you can start right where you're at. If you are not been in your Bible at all and can't barely find the thing or don't have one, that's all right. You just, get one, get online, get an app, go whatever. And you just start that process of saying, God, let's talk, and getting into your Word little by little, consistently, until that relationship starts growing, just like any other relationship you've ever started and grown into a great relationship. At some point, it had to start somewhere, and it's no different with your relationship with God. So I'm going to leave it at that for tonight, and trust God to take some of that and help you in your progress with your relationship and in your life. And we will see you guys the next time on the Family Bible Study. So love you guys. Make it a good rest of your evening or whenever you see this. All right, bye. If you have found this teaching helpful, consider subscribing to the channel and click the notification bell. That way you'll be alerted whenever new content is released from the Faith, Hope, Love Initiative channel.